Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kristen. I'm the Integro webinar moderator. If you're new to Integro and our webinar series, hello and welcome. We do monthly webinars. We always keep it to 30 minutes, so it's a valuable and efficient use of your time. On the line with me today, I have John Frost. He's the VP of Sales here at Integro, and he has over 25 years of experience in the ECM and ILG space. And he's going to be talking about covering your assets, sensitive data cleanup, specifically focused on the financial industry. Before I let John take it away, I do have a few quick notes for you guys. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time during John's presentation. You can do so in the sidebar, and we'll answer all of those at the end. And second, feel free to maximize your screen. It'll give you the best view. And yeah, John?
All right. So Kristen, before we get started, do you want to do the poll, please?
Yeah, I will start the poll for you guys here. Question is, how confident are you that you have complete control over your sensitive data within your organization? So all those on the line, if you guys want to submit your votes, we will share the results here in a few seconds. Okay, almost half of you guys have voted. I'll give you a couple more seconds to submit your votes. This is the only poll today, so make sure you get your vote in. All right, I will close this down and share the results with you guys. John, can you see those results?
I cannot.
It'll be on the sidebar, but I can also share the results. So that looks like 13%, very confident that you have complete control over your sensitive data. I think so is also at 13%. Not so much is the winner on this poll, with 63% saying that they do not have complete control over their sensitive data, and another 13% said no clue. So I will close down the results.
All right, thank you. So that's kind of what we predicted. Knowing what's going on in the industry and how much information that you have in your organizations that you're trying to get control of. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. It's going to be somewhat focused on the financial industry, but if you're not in the financial industry, it certainly can apply to you. We hope to give you a lot of good information. As you know, I generally have a few more slides than you would normally squeeze into 30 minutes, but I try and give you the most information I can in the limited time we have together. So. And I hope to do that today and give you some good takeaways. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about sensitive data cleanup in finance. We'll talk about what the problem is and why we need sensitive data cleanup, some of the data cleanup best practices and processes, some of the types of remediation when you're working through data cleanup. It's you do assessment and then you have to remediate that content. So some of the different types of remediation. And then we'll go through a case study with a financial institution that we've worked with in the past and give you some interesting statistics on what went on there. So what is the problem? So right now you've seen, I'm sure, with other information management presentations or governance presentations about the volume of information and how fast it's growing in the organization, how most of that is unstructured content. So it's growing so rapidly. And as that expands on you, you have a lot of uncertainty on what you have, what kind of data you have, where it's located, and how to work with regulatory requirements and how to keep your information protected. We also have to worry about hacking and insider threats. And so you need to, and you want to get control of information that has, personal data or PII, PCI types of information in it. So today we're going to show you some ways that hopefully you can work through that. So sensitive data, I think we all know what sensitive data is. For the purposes of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is coming out May 25th of next year in the European Union, they call everything personal data. So in the States, we like to break it down between PII, which is Social Security driver's license type stuff, PCI, which is credit card information, and HCI, which is digital communications, human resources, and strategy documents, more like IP, if you will. So what we want to do with you is show you methods and show you use cases on how you can get a hold of that in your organization. So why are you wanting to do it? Of course, you have regulatory breaches. You have fines with some of this. There's data breaches and hacking, of course. And when that happens, if you look at such as Sony, and what you're starting to see with Equifax is reputation risk. Data is getting out in the public. In some cases, like with Sony, you have individuals being talked about and not in a very good light, and so by execs of the organization. So it can really hurt your reputation of your organization. You also have privacy obligations to your employees, to your customers, etc. Those of you dealing with the global data, the general data protection regulation, you have consent management, who can allow you, individuals allowing you access to the content, how that goes about, and also the right to erasure or the right to be forgotten. If I tell you to get rid of my data, you have an obligation to get rid of that data. For finance, a lot of institutions are needing to deal with PCI-DSS compliance and FINRA rules. So you need to try and find this information. You need to remedy this information and remediate as quickly as possible. So what are some of the practices? First thing you have to deal with is people, of course. When you're dealing with sensitive data cleanup, you're wanting to issue through a sensitive data cleanup program, you need to have everybody from your IT and exec, including the business, involved in this. This is it's not a pure technology solution. Technology provides you a lot of efficiency so you can do things a bit faster, but your executives are going to need to be involved from a policy standpoint and a support standpoint. You're going to have security and governance involved for a regulatory standpoint. You'll need the business involved to help you understand the use of that data. We're finding this sensitive data in this documentation. What was that documentation used for? What is the need to keep it, and how, and on assistance on how to remediate it. You need to make sure you have efficient policy development and enforcement. So you need to make sure that you have efficient policies in place for managing your information, and especially managing your confidential or secure information. You have to have effective planning for a program like this, and you have to have a good execution on the strategy. These types of, when you're dealing with sensitive data, especially in a large organization like a large financial institution, these are not normally 3 and 6 month projects. You're going to be looking at generally anywhere from 18 months to 2 years, if not longer, to really do what you need to do to effectively control the sensitive data. And you're going to do it in phases. So you do need to have proper planning in place and good strategy behind it. So some of the main processes you're going to be dealing with when you're working with sensitive data cleanup is you're going to start with, you're actually going to have your policy review and procedure review to make sure you have your policies in place that will work with this type of program. If not, you need to get those in order. You'll then work towards a data assessment. So find out the data you have, where is it located in the organization. You then go to identification. You're going to be, from the data from the data sources that you have, you're going to take the tools and go out and identify the content that has personal data in it, or confidential or sensitive data in it, so that you can work on a way to remediate. You're then going to work either, if you haven't done policy, you're going to create that policy. If you have the policy, you're going to work to enforce that policy, and you're going to have processes in place to, once you determine the content, to move that toward a remediation for policy enforcement. So in identification, and it's also important to understand when you go through remediation and when you're doing a program like this, you're going to start in this long-term, as I told you, this 18 months to 2 years, is going to be mainly for your backlog. But what you're going to want to make sure you do is you have processes in place and tools in place to continue this, because just because you cleaned it up the first time doesn't mean that more is not going to get involved. You're going to help with your improved policy and processes. You're going to help to try and lower that. But you still will have some in, and so you'll need to do these processes over and over again periodically in smaller chunks, because you've done the backlog. Now you're going to have to do incremental fixes over time. So so in doing part of your processes, especially identification and assessment, you're going to look for file analysis tools, file analysis solutions that's going to provide you the actionable intelligence that you need to locate the sensitive data. So you're going to leverage, you can start and leverage metadata only searches, which kind of helps from a high level decide what the content is, who the business owners are, etc. Then you'll get into full context index and provide complex searches using queries that actually go into the content itself and find the sensitive data that you're looking for. You're going to scan across numerous content data sources from file shares, ECM systems, SharePoint, things of that nature, Box perhaps, and you have the possibility as you're doing this to integrate with structured tools to provide you a more unified governance approach to your sensitive data cleanup. So you'll be able to match, in some cases you can match what's in your structured repositories with the unstructured counterparts in the file shares, et cetera, so that you can work on a remediation plan holistically. You'll also be leveraging dashboard technology in the file analysis solutions, and this will help you isolate that sensitive data more quickly. From running the queries will provide you these digital dashboards, and from these dashboards you can quickly isolate the areas where the sensitive data is, so that you can have reviews with your business users and business teams to enable a quick remediation. You can decide on remediation and start working on a fast remediation plan. So when using a file analysis solution, and there are several on the market, StoredIQ being one of them, you need to know your data volumes up front. So when you're starting a sensitive data play and a program, you need to understand the data volumes. How much data are we going to be looking at in the organization? From a high level, who owns that data? And what are the data sources that are going to need analysis? As I mentioned earlier, some of them could be SharePoint, file shares, et cetera. So as we stated earlier, the project's going to be a bit longer duration, especially for the backlog. These are not things in a larger organization where you're dealing with terabytes of data. This is not something you're going to do a quick hit on. You need proper planning. You need time to do these things accurately and correctly to put yourself in compliance. So you, again, plan on these things starting at 18 months and going up, over 2 years. You want to have an ongoing sensitive data maintenance plan, as I talked about earlier. It's not one and done. You'll have incremental, and you can plan that out every 6 months, every year, every 2 years, whatever. But you want to do it somewhat frequently, so you're not dealing with big time scales like you are in the original backlog. But you do want to have a maintenance plan in place that you can go through these data sources continuously over periods of time and handle your sensitive data as part of your remediation. With the backlog, you're putting the framework in place for the continued use. Have your retention, security, and privacy requirements defined. So a lot of this stuff you're going to be dealing with records management issues. You're going to be dealing with security issues. And you need to have these policies and stuff in place so that when you're making decisions on a remediation, you can refer to that policy and be able to identify the best remediation plan as quickly as possible. So once you've done your identification, you've got your content, you've located the sensitive data where it is, you've reviewed it with the business, then you're ready to discuss and finalize your remediation. You're going to have different types of remediation for different types of the business and for how that policy applies to the different types of the business. In some cases, you're going to have deletion. This is information that's no longer needed. You want to get it out of the organization according to the retention schedules. Others may be part of a hold or other measure, and so you need to secure them. So you need to remove them from where they are or encrypt them in place so that only the proper people can access that sensitive data. You may want to mask or redact it. So you're going to alter the data in place because it's still used for a business process, but perhaps not everybody needs to see it, or maybe it has a longer retention span, and so not everybody needs to see that sensitive data. So you're going to mask or redact to protect the original piece of data, and so that business users still need it for a business purpose. They can still see it, but they don't necessarily need to see. They need it for validation purposes, such as a driver's license. Okay, so we see we have a driver's license. They don't need to know that the driver's license number and things of that nature. So you can mask that data with alternate data. And tokenize, you can replace data with a token. So you can have a credit card number on a document, and then using tokenization, you can replace that with a dummy credit card number. And as it goes through the process, only individuals who have the right to see the credit card number, the token will decrypt itself, and you'll actually see the real credit card number. For the rest of the process, they see the tokenized number because they don't need access to it. So deleting it. Some of the things to consider when you're going to delete the data is, is it a record? Does it need to fall under the records retention policies? Are you having trouble determining the business value? Is it maybe perhaps an older document? perhaps a special use document and you're having trouble determining what the business value is, or you determine that the business value is negligible. And if it's no value to the business, if it is or is not part of a legal hold. So if it's part of a legal hold, of course, you're going to have to keep it. But if you don't, then you can look to delete it and get rid of it, because it's what we consider redundant, obsolete, or trivial information. So securing it. This is used, again, when you have things such as it may be rot, or it may be good information or records, but you need to move it because it's under some type of business hold. If you don't know, so you may have something in a business process and you don't know the system that generated it. So in order to determine what system generated and buy yourself more time for that specific set of content, then you need to go ahead and lock it down, encrypt it, or move it. That gives you time to go find source systems, and then from the source systems to business owners, et cetera. So you can determine how that content's used in the process, how removal of that content will be a disruption to the process, and how will you be creating new sensitive data through that process. Redacting or masking, we talked about that a little bit. It's less disruptive than deletion or securing. It allows you to change content, change data within the document or within the content, but while allowing you to continue the business process. And in some cases, only the proper users who are allowed to see that content, to see the original content, are allowed to see it. So if the sensitive data doesn't add value to the content itself, then it's a good use case for redaction or masking. So we all know, redaction is basically blacking things out. We get a lot of that. We do government requests. We see a redaction when they provide their information. Masking basically creates a new version of the content or replaces the content with dummy data. So let's say you have a name, name with a social security number, or name with patient number. What you can do is you have data tables. Those data tables can hold dummy data about each data entry, and then feed that dummy data into your system, so that when the user that does not need full access to all that data sees that username or sees that record, they're seeing the dummy data. This helps prevent internal issues. Oops, my apologies, I skipped one. Got too fast on it. And so you can put fictitious data either within structured data or within unstructured content for this purpose. So you can still move through an HR process, let's say, for a hiring process or something in that nature, and only certain individuals who need to see social security numbers, like the HR reviewer, possibly someone in finance, can see it. But as it's moving through HR analysts or finance analysts, getting from point A to point B, they can be shown dummy data because they don't need to see and don't need to have access to the original content, right, for part of their business, for their business purpose. Again, you can also do, when it comes to images, if you're dealing with images such as driver's license, you can leverage direct pixel manipulation. So same principle as handling content that's been modified within documents or in databases, but basically it feeds a new layer into the image that provides, say, a dummy driver's license number or a dummy name or a dummy photograph, so that when it's moving through the process, someone needs to validate that it's a driver's license, but they really don't need to see what that driver's license number is. You can leverage this technology to do that. So, and then tokenization, as I explained earlier, is basically taking a number such as a credit card number, putting a token on that number within the piece of content, and providing a dummy number for those who don't need to see the actual credit card number. This type of technology is used quite a bit in the insurance industry and in the financial industry. So then finally, on remediation, you would have intelligent redaction. With intelligent redaction, that's basically masking at the glass. So this is for dynamic masking when users are doing processes virtually. And so you can do dummy just through virtualization. So they're running through the business process, their user is looking at their screen, and so you put fake data in place of the real data while it's on screen. but it's not actually manipulating the content itself. It's showing you on screen and it moves on to the next process, and if the next person gets to see it, they get to see it. So it's a role-based redaction. It does require, you know, additional setup and additional security, but it's very handy when you're dealing with such as mortgage loans, such as HR, onboarding, offboarding, things of that nature. And so basically what you would have is a process, as we've shown earlier, where you have an unredacted document that needs to go to a manager who has elevated privileges for certain things. And then if it has to go through a rep or an analyst who needs to validate that the document is there, or validate certain pieces of the content but do not need to see the sensitive data, then they would basically be shown on screen, be shown either a redaction notice or a piece of dummy data. So that tells you a little bit about some of the redactions. So we've gone through identification. So you do data assessment, then you do identification. You found the stuff. Now you've worked with a business to identify how to remediate, and you provided remediation on that content. Once you've done the backlog, you're going to do continued maintenance around that. So every, say, 6 months to a year, you're going to run back through the process. You now have your baseline in place, and you've done it with your backlog. So now your policies are up to date. Your processes are up to date. You have the proper remediation for the proper type of content, and so you just make it a normal part of your business process. So in this example, we worked with a large financial institution. The institution was preparing for PCI-DSS compliance. They were trying to find credit card numbers or PAN in their data sources, and they needed to develop remediation for the results. They had to be compliant, and then in addition to becoming compliant with PCI-DSS, they were also trying to identify other PII risks. So we're going through a full process with them through remediation on PAN data, but then on other stuff such as social security numbers, things of that nature. We were identifying that stuff, going through the identification process with them, so they can make a determination on how to proceed forward for future. So about 6 months in the program, the identification process was completed, went through policy, did policy creation and update, and then socialized that with the business. So understand what PII they had, what sensitive data they had, and then we're ready to work towards steps in remediation, which the remediation steps will end up taking a bit longer than the initial identification steps. Then they worked to add additional policies around supported systems to help lock down and provide proper remediation around their sensitive data. And then they built an actual remediation program. So working with the business, putting additional policies in place for support, as we talked about, for the long-term maintenance of ensuring that your sensitive data is protected. So in this case, we dealt with a little over 200 terabytes of information, and they were located in Exchange emails, application servers, file shares, and SharePoint. Just in file shares, we were able to locate over 1.2 million files containing PAN, and we also found another 1.7 containing some form of PII. So it was a pretty good find for them. Over 60% of the mailboxes had some form of PAN or PII in them. This would have been cases of credit card numbers being sent over email or received over email, either in attachments or in the body of the email, etc. So, and then in the application server area, small application servers, we found over 100,000 files that had PAN data. The small managed environment, they had SharePoint. It wasn't a full enterprise release of SharePoint. It was a several department deployment. They ended up finding about 325 files that had PAN data. So part of the remediation piece, we built secure environment for storing that, and so a lot of the stuff, as we talked about earlier, we had to build controls for moving and securing the content. So we built a controlled access point, an area where we moved a lot of the PAN data for further review to handle remediation, and at this point, it's the only place that you can store PAN data. So it was built natively for PAN data only, and as PAN data is identified, it's moved in there temporarily for review. There's a high cost for storing that data, so they're moving through now and working on remediation. and then of course the long-term remediation plan, strategic plan for remediation long-term. And businesses has defined the reasons the data is required. So as you're finding these types of data, as you're finding sensitive data, you need to validate why it's being created. There was a lot of cases, because you're even finding these things in system-to-system log files. So certain business systems are talking to one another, and they're loading some of this PAN data in the log files. So in some cases, you're finding that these were systems or reports or things of that nature where the sensitive data was created, but for some reason the process has been changed, but these systems are still creating the data even though there's no need for the process. So part of what you're doing and part of what's been done is working with that business to, here's your sensitive data, let's identify the processes associated with, is it still a valid reason to keep that data? Is there any reason the association, that the organization still needs to be creating and maintaining that sensitive data? Another piece was the PAN data on file shares. We found 11% of all the data. So as we told you, the 1.2 we found, it was 11% of all the data that we looked at was PAN data. After the reviews, the move-in reviews, it looked like that almost 90% of that data the users agreed could be deleted. It was either through processes that were no longer valid, retention schedules that had been met, etc. So they are working towards a removal or deletion remediation for this stuff, and they've combined that with education classes on creating and managing and dealing with sensitive data. As I told you, they had machine generated, they had found older data, they had found log files, they had found system-to-system data, and some of the data, as they started going through their processes, they could delete, and a lot of it that was greater than 7 years old that they could delete. But they did find that a lot of it they still needed to keep. It was still part of valid business processes. And they did identify fixes in that process and enhance their processes so that they do reviews, can do periodic reviews on processes, so that if processes need to be shut down or modified and the PAN data is no longer needed, they can deal with that during process reviews. We talked about the log files. They did identify stuff in log files generating PAN, and they are running a tool now, a masking tool that redacts all that PAN daily on the log file. So they dealt with the backlog, and now they've done a remediation for point forward. There was PAN going through on the loan group for some of their processes, and now they've come up with a batch process at night for nightly masking that PAN. They'll leave the last 4, but then they mask out the rest of the numbers that they have, loan numbers, etc. And they're also doing that with Social Security numbers. So they've been able to do this process. It's working efficiently for them, etc. So they can now maintain the process where they had it. They were having to look at the potential of moving this over to a secured network, which would have cost a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of IT resources. But because of the masking technology that was used working with us, they were able to keep the application and process out of that secured network. So over half of the PAN was mass redact or redacted in place. It alleviated the risk. It saved costs by not having to move stuff or deal with special secured networks, etc. So it saved them a bit of money as well, and they can continue with business processes, and they have maintain business processes to deal with this PAN. We did stuff that we did move over for further review is being continuously reviewed, and remediation plans are being dealt with on a continuous basis as they further investigate stuff that had to be moved out and secured. And they have made masking and redaction in place actually part of their key tool for compliance. So leveraging this tool has become part of their process, and it's a key part of keeping them in compliance and maintaining their sensitive data. So what we've talked to you a little bit about is kind of the high-level process for dealing with sensitive data cleanup, what you have to have in place, what you need to deal with. Then we've talked about the process around identification, process around masking and remediation, and giving you some ways that you can do that. So in closing, you have to have proper policies in place. You need to plan for that data volume. So you need to understand up front when you're working with, getting with and working with a vendor, even before you bring a vendor in, you need to identify your data sources and the volume of data you're going to be dealing with, and you should identify high level the owners of that data. The business unit will be involved as you're going through this process. They're going to have to be involved in helping you with understanding the processes by which that sensitive data is used and helping you with remediation planning and how to remediate that content. There's several methods of remediation we talked to you about. Combination is going to be used. So depending on the business, depending on the process, will determine and retention schedules, et cetera, was going to determine what type of remediation you're going to be using, whether it's securing, destroying, masking, redacting, or tokenization. To ensure your success, you want to have appropriate expectations on your budget and timeline. You want to make sure you understand that you're bringing in several types of tools, you're bringing in vendors to help you with this. Depending on how you're having to remediate, there could be additional IT costs, setting up new systems, et cetera, to help deal with the sensitive data. And you have to understand that this is not a quick hit. While these file analysis tools do work efficiently and they work very fast to help you derive decisions, you still, when you're dealing with terabytes of data that large organizations do, it's going to take a while to go through the full process from identification through remediation. So if you're looking at this and you're very interested in this, you can work with Integro. We can definitely help you in this area. We can help you with solving business cases to get funding. Of course, we're experts in doing sensitive data cleanup and have done it for numerous customers. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I am going to turn it over to Kristen for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, John. First question for you, John. John, just so you know, folks can see the GoToWebinar pop out on your screen.
Okay.
Unfortunately. First question for you. Can a file analysis tool be used for other use cases besides sensitive data cleanup?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the things when you're dealing with a file analysis tool. The beauty of it is you may be bringing it in for sensitive data cleanup, but it has other use cases, such as it can help you with compliance, with records management compliance. It can be used for mergers and acquisitions, so helping locate content in a merger and acquisition case. It can help you locate what needs to be moved over, what doesn't need to be moved over, things of that nature. It can be used for just standard file share cleanup, getting rid of all the junk you have out there and keeping stuff of hold or record value. So there's numerous use cases that you can use these types of tools for.
Awesome. And just for the folks online, I know we've gone over the 30-minute mark. This is recorded, so if you have to hop off, that's fine. We'll continue to answer questions in the meantime. Can you elaborate on using file analysis tools with structured data analysis tools, John?
Sure. So with structured data, there are tools out there that are very good at going in and finding things such as sensitive data within a structured data or in mainframe systems. What you can do, and some of the technology that's available now, is you can leverage those tools and integrate with things like an IBM Stored IQ, the file analysis tool, to locate sensitive data within the structured side and then map that to any unstructured counterpart. So if you have an invoicing system that's out there and you're dealing with a structured and unstructured sensitive data issue, you can go into the sensitive data system, into the structured data system. You can locate that sensitive data. You can use that data and the information around it to go and find associated unstructured content within your file shares or within SharePoint, et cetera. So you have this seamless view of the process between structured and unstructured in your organization, and you can deal with that and remediate that. And that's some of the things that Integro can help you with.
Great, thanks, John. So guys, last call for questions. If you have any questions, ask them in the sidebar. Another question for you, John. You stated the project could take more than a year. which means funding. How would I try to justify funding for a project like this?
Sure. Well, the best way to do that is look at your need, try and develop a business case. If you don't already have executive support and executive charge for cleaning up sensitive data in your organization, but you feel the need and you see the need for this, you need to work on such things as a business case. And there are some things that Integro can help you with there, calculations, et cetera. We can help put in your business case to give you some real metrics to take back to the organization to justify the financial investment as well. So.
Well, great. Looks like we didn't get any last minute questions. I'll just remind everyone on the line that we do have a 1-question survey that'll pop up once you close out of the webinar, just to give your feedback on how you thought we did. And John, I will let you close out.
Okay. Well, as we're seeing in the market, sensitive data, especially in financial institutions, is becoming a very big thing. With all of the, with GDPR, with all of the hacking that's going on right now, it's becoming a big priority for organizations. So if Integro can help you in any way, we are here to help, and we would look forward to working with you. So with that, have a good day, everybody. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to see you next month.